Today, we'll be discussing a very important topic, even clinically and theoretically, in the field of neurology, that is the Sellar Masses. Now, when I refer to this particular terminology of Sellar Masses, basically we are discussing the pituitary sella turcica over here. Now, what is this particular area that we're talking about today, and what can go wrong possibly over here that can result in a particular kind of a clinical picture in an individual? This relation is again very important, and just to relate to the clinical features and just to relate to the overall clinical picture that we will be observing in these range of patients. Obviously, it's not obvious, usually it is not quite easy to diagnose these cases, and it is only accessible in cases in which we perform the radiological imaging studies, and only then you come up to a definitive diagnosis in these particular patients that what exact area is involved in the underlying pathology, and that is mimicking these particular kind of clinical features over here. So this is again very important. It's again very interesting, and we'll be going into the detailed study of this particular region, which is known as Sellar turcica. Now, this depression, the sella turcica, is basically a depression in the sphenoid bone, as it is highlighted over here by red. And as you can see, it's a concavity that is present at the base of the skull. Now, why is this area clinically so important? It is very important because it is basically accommodating the pituitary gland over here. Now, the pituitary is lying over here. You can just imagine that it is lying over here, and it has basically the anterior lobe, and we have a posterior lobe, both of which are lying in this depression, which is known as sella turcica. So usually the masses which reside in this particular area of sella turcica, they would not be particularly bound to this depression only. And when you'd be viewing this particular area through the computed tomography techniques or through the magnetic resonance imaging techniques, that is the MRIs, the CTs and the MRIs are the mainstays over here. And through these radio imaging techniques, only then we can diagnose that what particular area is involved. And this is quite simple. We are going to basically know the basic anatomy of this particular region. And the relations over here are again very important. We must know and we must recall the neuroanatomical features that we've already studied and that we already know as a baseline in our neuroanatomy. That first of all, we have an anterior lobe and a posterior lobe. The posterior lobe of the pituitary is basically connected by the infundibular stalk to the hypothalamus. Now, when we say the word hypothalamus, even that cannot be pinpointed through any diagrams exactly. And it's just the relations that you have to remember, that hypothalamus is a particular area and which is very important in secreting different hormones, and it's basically controlling the secretions of the posterior pituitary lobe of the pituitary gland. So this is the posterior pituitary is basically under the control of hypothalamus, and hypothalamus in return is under the control of the arcuate nucleus, which in turn basically responds to the environmental stresses as well as the circadian rhythm, that is the clock that is set in our brain. So the morning and the evenings are basically sensed by the arcuate nucleus, and it basically passes on the message to the hypothalamus, and which in turn controls the secretion of particular hormones from the posterior pituitary. So the cycle, or we can also call it in other terms, it's also known as the hypothalamic pituitary axis. And in return, obviously, there are specific organs, for instance, thyroid, and then we have the adrenals that are secreting the particular hormones and that are in control to these particular hypothalamic pituitary axis. And they basically respond to the secretions of the pituitary in return. So knowing this basic axis and how it is connected, and then obviously it can be the sellar masses, and they have an indirect action on the suprasellar region. That is, the hypothalamus is even involved. It can be the pressure symptoms as well. And all of these are basically going to regulate the functioning of the hypothalamus and even interfere with that as well. So sellar masses and the suprasellar region is also affected by this, by these sellar masses that we're going to study over here. As you can see, this slight depression is affecting a lot of areas. It's affecting the suprasellar region, and if it's even affecting the lateral capacities as well. As you can even relate over here, that the lateral aspects of the sella turcica, they basically contain the cavernous sinus. Now, why is this cavernous sinus important? It is carrying the major cranial nerves, that is the third, the oculomotor nerve. Then we have the fourth, that is the trochlear nerve. And then we have the sixth cranial nerve, which is the abducens nerve. So it's basically carrying the third, fourth, and the sixth cranial nerves. They have their own functioning capacities, and the sellar masses sometimes also have the pressure symptoms on the cavernous sinus. We'll be relating to our case study, as we saw that the patient who basically reported to you in the outpatient department came up with the presenting complaints of headache primarily, and then the visual problems. Now, why were the visual problems present? Due to this particular reason, that the oculomotor nerve was compressed, and that resulted in the particular set of the visual problems in the patient. So basically, it's very important for you people to understand this particular concept, that we have the pituitary that is residing in the sella turcica. And if there are any masses of any kind, may it be the tumorous masses or may it be the inflammatory conditions that can arise in this particular region, they are going to have the pressure symptoms on the relations that they're going to have, the lateral relations, the suprasellar relations, the posterior relations that it has. Primarily, we have the Gasserian ganglion that is present posteriorly. So knowing these features is very important, that you know the exact relations of the sella turcica, what is residing interiorly. We have the optic chiasma. And if there are specific pressure symptoms on the optic chiasma, which is basically the area in which we have the optic nerve that is passing on and that is present interiorly to the dorsum sella that is present. So we have a depression, the sella turcica, and anteriorly we have that clinoid processes anteriorly as well as posteriorly, and then we have the dorsum sella, which is basically a bony projection at the anterior end of the sella turcica. So knowing these particular features and naming them is very important, because when you'd be looking at the CTs and the MRIs, you must know how to locate the exact position of the mass and just relate it to whether it is nearer to the clinoid processes anteriorly or to the clinoid processes posteriorly, or either it is in close relation to the optic chiasma. And obviously, we'll be relating to the size of the sella turcica as well. Knowing the exact anatomical lengths, obviously, they're just a reference, and there can be variations from person to person as well. So when you look at this particular area, you would be looking at the depression, and its length has to be almost 13 millimeters in a normal individual. Obviously, it can be a plus minus, and then we have the width that can basically variate from 10 to 15 millimeters. So this is the normal length and width of this particular depression that we're talking about. So if it exceeds, the shadows exceed this particular length and these particular widths over here, then we must relate to the fact that there is some kind of a mass. And again, the masses have to be homogeneous in their nature. And the posterior pituitary masses, they have their distinctive appearances. They appear to be brighter than the anterior pituitary masses. The reason behind, they have more fat component, the kind of hormones that are being secreted, again, basically makes the posterior pituitary masses a bit brighter. They appear brighter on the CTs and the MRIs than the anterior pituitary masses. And we'd be looking at the positioning of the infundibular stalk, and if there are any kind of variations, a left deviation or a right deviation, it's basically going to be a contralateral deviation. The mass is going to be present on the opposite side to the deviation. So we'd be looking at these particular features. You have to keep in mind the relations laterally as well as anteriorly and posteriorly to this particular region of sella turcica that we'd be focusing on in this particular lecture. What can possibly go wrong? It can be even the benign tumors. We have a range of microadenomas, we have a range of macroadenomas. By definition, microadenomas basically relate to masses less than 1 centimeter, and then we have the macroadenomas that basically by definition are masses more than 1 centimeter. So whatever the case is, it can be a benign tumor, a local tumor, and even it can be a metastatic tumor that basically arises primarily in a distinct region and then passes on to this particular area of sella turcica. Whatever the case is, we have to basically treat the patient accordingly. And obviously, the symptomatic treatment is again very important. The investigations would reveal a lot of factors. For instance, in our case study, we saw that the prolactin levels were slightly raised, and it is usually the case. Usually the adenomas, the pituitary adenomas would be related to the fact that the prolactinemia would be present in these patients, and we have to deal in with these patients accordingly because they are going to show the specific signs and symptoms. And obviously, if the patient is suffering from headache, the symptomatic treatment is given to the patient. And obviously, the management lies upon the surgical excision or the surgical recession of the particular masses that arise in these areas. And it would basically depend upon the different areas that they have invaded. For instance, if they have involved the cavernous sinus, we'd manage the case accordingly because the third, fourth, and the sixth cranial nerve would be affected respectively in these cases. So we'd move on basically with our discussion of sellar masses and get into the details of these particular sellar masses over here.